Understanding the fruit of the Spirit is the answer to life's most difficult questions and especially our relational difficulties. This is why the fruit of the Spirit is the answer to relational difficulties, because that kind of sacrificial love towards others produces joy in you and it produces joy in them. So this is my fourth video covering this book, The Book of Easy Answers, written by a pastor friend of mine and one of his colleagues. So in this chapter, Carrie Pocha argues that understanding the fruit of the Spirit is the answer to life's most difficult questions, and especially our relational difficulties. So if you're interested in the book, you can find the link in the description below as well as in the first comment. Now recently I've been visiting with this guy who used to be super hard to get along with. Actually, he liked me, but he didn't really want to talk to me because I was a chaplain, preacher, a pastor, a man of the cloth. So it's been a couple years and now his health is not good, and he's asked me to come see him on a daily basis and read the Bible to him, so praise the Lord for that. Now he's always been a believer, but a believer with an attitude. Anyway, since his health has declined, he's getting things back on track spiritually. We visit daily, and others have even said there's just something different about that guy. Now in a minute here, I'm going to tell you what happened to him. But first, I want to tell you about my experience with gardening. You see, every year for the last 20 years, I've done a garden, except for this year. This year, I ended up going to Africa. My daughter had surgery, and we've just had a lot of things come up this summer. And anyway, we just couldn't get to it. But I love gardening. And one of our first years in gardening, we planted pole beans, which was a huge mistake. You see, some people really like pole beans. I don't. You see, they vine out instead of bushing out. So I asked a seasoned gardener, what could I do to make this thing work? So this gardener, he comes and he looks at my garden and he says, it's still pretty early in the year. It's not too late to replant. So his idea was to just till that ground up and replant bush beans. You see, I couldn't see uprooting all those plants. And so instead of replanting, we found some old fence. We put it down the rows, and then we took those vines that shot across the rows, those vines that trailed on the ground, sheltered from the light, those vines that were covered with dirt and grass clippings. We picked every one of them up. I tell you, you talk about monotonous, you talk about monotonous, you talk about monotonous, you talk about monotonous. We picked every one of those up, we cleaned them off, and we stretched them over to the fence so that the tendrils could wrap around and start growing up the fence, and they can get the sunlight and the nutrition that they needed to thrive. You see, I just thought it was foolish to cut off a branch without giving it a chance to grow, to develop, and to produce a good harvest. And then I was reminded of John chapter 15, where Jesus said that I am the true vine and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, he takes away, and every branch that bears fruit, he prunes so that it may bear more fruit. Now, I'm not sure if we have the best translation here, you see, because some versions read that he takes them away or he cuts them away. And I think that we've misinterpreted that to teach that he gets rid of that branch. But the word literally means to pick up, to lift up, to raise up. Like I did with the beans, You see, if you're a Christian and you're not producing fruit, rather than cut you off, rather than get rid of you, I think that he picks you up. I think that he cleans you off. And I think that he sets you on the right path. Because it would just be foolish. It'd be foolish of God to get rid of one of his children without giving them a chance to thrive, a chance to grow and to develop. I think you can be a Christian and not bear fruit, but I don't think you're going to stay that way. Whether it's beans or trees, all the fruit is produced from the branch. And the branch receives its life from the vine. Jesus says it like this, that no branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Then he says that I'm the vine, you are the branches. If a man remain in me and I in him, he will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can't do anything. Now, throughout this passage, Jesus makes the reference to fruit, to more fruit, and to much fruit. So the first question that needs to be asked is, what in the world is fruit? And we can go to Galatians 5:22 and 23, and Paul answers this directly. And he says that the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. Those 9 fruits of the Spirit. Now, that's not an exhaustive list, and it's not an exhaustive definition of fruit, but it is definitely part of the definition. Now, in this chapter, Carrie Pocha argues that understanding the fruit of the Spirit is the answer to life's most difficult questions and especially our relational difficulties. This is why we will always be a branch that is producing fruit. But unlike agricultural branches and vines, we decide what we will connect our lives to. And that will be the source of our life. So we're either going to connect our lives to the world or to Jesus. One source leads to life and the other source leads to death. Remember that guy from the beginning? He was connected to the world. And it was literally destroying him emotionally, physically, relationally. But when he chose to receive life from the true vine, things turned around almost instantly. His physical health is still poor, no doubt about that, but his emotional and his spiritual health is growing. He wasn't discarded, but rather, I believe that he was picked up. He was brushed off. He was given another chance to thrive. So I agree with Carrie when he says that our problem is that we have a tendency to understand fruit in the context of the true meaning rather than their spiritual meaning. Let me explain. The fruit of the Spirit begins with love. And we're not talking about love the way that the world understands love. It's not a friendship or an affection, but rather it's God's sacrificial love. And that love has been birthed within us. And one thing that people don't think about is that for fruit to be of any benefit or to be effective, fruit has to be sacrificed. It can't just keep hanging on a vine. It can't just keep hanging from the branch in order to satisfy or reproduce. No, the thing has to be picked. And then it has to be sacrificed. Jesus said that unless a grain of wheat fall to the ground and it dies, it remains alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Pocha reminds us that the fruit of love is a sacrificial love. And we love others because he first loved us. This is why the fruit of the Spirit is the answer to relational difficulties, because that kind of sacrificial love towards others produces joy in you and it produces joy in them. This joy then blossoms into and produces peace in spite of the storms that we face. And then this peace produces patience, loving patience, and kindness towards others. But this only happens because we're connected to the vine. The vine is his love in us, flowing through us to others. Living like a Christian and producing fruit is not for the really religious. It's the destiny and expectation of every believer. Jesus said in John 15 that you didn't choose me, but I chose you and I appointed you to bear much fruit. It's his life, the vine, that is actually flowing through us, the branches. And he says, look, I'm going to do whatever it takes to help you grow, like pruning, which is to cut off the unproductive areas, to remove harmful things that are preventing growth. And it may be things like changing priorities or changing our values or changing our habits or changing our friends. And sometimes as we go through this pruning process, it's going to be painful. But listen, God doesn't want anything in your life that hinders your growth. And so everything that he does out of his love and his care for you. Now listen, when one has been truly saved, when they've been born again, when they are a new creation, they cannot do anything but produce fruit. Knowing what fruit God is producing is an easy answer to the questions we have about how to have happy, healthy relationships with others. We must remain devoted to God and allow his love to flow in us and through us to the world around us. Is there somebody in your life where a bridge has been burned rather than built? Is there a relationship in your life that is on the fritz? Is there a relationship in your life that has been severed? I believe that at this moment, he's picking you up, that he's removing things from your life, that he's exposing you to his son, and he's giving you a second chance to grow, to develop, and to produce fruit. How are you going to respond to this message? Are you going to remain in him and thrive and grow, or are you going to shrivel up and eventually die? The choice is yours. God bless.